Bound by Flame had promise of an ambitious title from French developer Spiders, a brand new intellectual property set in a dark fantasy world with an action RPG backbone. But ambitions and realities don't always align. Bound by Flame might not be that wholly satisfying experience you were hoping for, but it might just be the title to tide you over if you're starving for a passable role-playing game. Bound by Flame takes place in the land of ViiTCHA, a world which has suffered countless casualties at the hand of an undead army invading from the icy north, forcing the sentient races of humans and elves nearly into extinction with only pockets of resistance willing to take place in a seemingly unwinnable war against the Deadwalkers and their necromancer masters, the Ice Lords. The plot has you playing as a man or woman named Vulcan of the Freeborn Blades, a mercenary band hired to protect the Red Scribes while they perform some type of special incantation in hopes of turning the tide of the war. During this incantation, things go awry and Vulcan's body has become infused with the spirit of a fire demon. Over the course of the game, it's up to you to rebel against the Ice Lords as well as how to treat the fire spirit within Vulcan's body. Do you renounce the flame, or do you embrace its influence? If you embrace the demon, Vulcan will sprout horns, his skin will become charred, and his voice will grow more demonic, and the characters of the world will react to these changes. Also, because of the horns, Vulcan can no longer equip helmets, but he will gain faster magic regeneration instead. There's always this sense of give and take with the demon's possession of Vulcan. This is a constant theme in Bound by Flame, a theme of choices and consequences. Unfortunately, those decisions given to you throughout the game have no real effect on the narrative more often than not. For example, you might be given the option to keep a sorceress imprisoned or set her free, but regardless of the decision made, she will be set free anyway. Or like when you're given the option to do battle at an elven city or bypass the city in hopes of reaching your true objective sooner, Vulcan ends up in the city despite your decisions anyway.
We will go together to Karathas. But once there, our paths must part.
Too many times it feels as though your choices are meaningless, and that you really only have control over deciding whether or not to have Vulcan embrace the demonic spirit held within him, but even that is forced upon you at times as well. The lack of impactful decisions detracts from the story and makes it difficult to care about the narrative. As it becomes more and more apparent that the choices have little effect on the game, it's easy to care less and less about the characters surrounding Vulcan. As a result, it didn't take long before I was no longer siding with characters based on morality or story progression. I simply began to make choices in favor of characters I found more useful mechanically, like the Red Scribe Sybil because she could heal and use magic. In the end, I was more interested in pushing Vulcan off the edge than anything else, off into the depths of his demonic transformation. Overall, Vulcan's progression is really the most interesting part of the game. With experience, Vulcan will gain 2 skill points and 1 feat point to distribute per level. Feats allow Vulcan to acquire various abilities, like improving haggling prices with merchants, lowering the cost to cast magic spells, raising health and mana pools, and much more. Feats can also play strongly into the game's robust weapon and armor customization system. Skill points, on the other hand, can be spent in one of 3 trees, which are Warrior with large two-handed weapons, Rogue with daggers and stealth abilities, and Pyromancy, which is fire magic. These skills can then be mapped to hotkeys for instant access, or a skill wheel can be activated to pull up abilities during combat. Combat for the most part is separated by 2 stances, Warrior and Rogue. The Warrior stance allows for harder hits, a kick to knock away shields, and stronger parrying abilities, whereas the Rogue has stealth, fast attacks, and the ability to actively dodge. Personally, I opted to use the Rogue stance as I highly prefer the quick reactionary style of the active dodge in combat opposed to the time parries and shield breaking of the Warrior. Overall though, the combat feels like a mix between Dark Souls and The Witcher, with the lock-on and targeting systems of a Souls game mixed with the free-flowing and whirling blades of The Witcher's combat. At times though, battles do have difficulty finding a rhythm or fluid balance. In one extreme, enemies have a deep health pool that feel like you just chip away at their health forever, while on the other extreme and a few well-placed skill points later, you're cutting through them like a hot knife through butter. It also doesn't help that you might be fighting the same enemies in the same area of the game at level 5 as you are at level 15 if you spend the time doing side quests. This might not sound like much, but in my 20-hour journey to complete the main storyline, including nearly every side quest, I finished the game at level 25. So needless to say, it's not overly enjoyable to fight the same enemies for what is essentially half of the game progression-wise. Without doubt, some of the enemies and environments definitely wear out their welcome long before you move on. Bound by Flame is a game that wears its inspirations on its sleeve. The narrative feels like fan-fictional events you might imagine for Game of Thrones. There's red scribes, a dead walker army, and a strong emphasis on an ice and fire theme. The gameplay and combat also is heavily reminiscent of the Witcher franchise, as well as keeping a very similar overall layout to the developer's previous work on Mars War Logs. And there's nothing wrong with that. Where would the world be without inspiration? But the problem is that Bound by Flame is a bit too derivative without being very innovative. In other words, Bound by Flame is a game for people that know exactly what they like, but most importantly, don't expect anything groundbreaking.